Okay, so let's now talk about this thing called scoping the subject. And I think this is one of the most important mantras. I first learned this from a friend of mine in med school who used to do really well in exams. I'm sure he still does if he takes exams to this day. But he coined the phrase scoping the subject. And basically the idea is that in order to understand something, we need to understand where it fits into the wider picture. And there's a phrase that I really like that I use a lot in this course, which is, we don't want to miss the forest from the trees. Like it can be so easy when we're sort of in the day-to-day studying of school, university, whatever. It can be so easy to focus on the detail, to focus on, okay, I've got to get through lecture 7 of pathology and lecture 9 of physiology now, that if we don't take the time to do it, it can be so easy to just forget what the bigger picture is. And I really used to have this problem. So when I first started out in my 4th year of med school, we started out in clinical medicine, and I had this idea that I was going to memorize the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine, which is one of the core texts that we had to use. And for some reason, I had this terrible idea that I was just going to flick to random pages, and if I did that enough, then over time I'd memorize the whole thing. Like, clearly this is completely terrible because there was no understanding there. It was pure memorization, and there was no way for me to hang details on the skeleton. And that's sort of how I think about it today, like either hanging details on a skeleton of the outline or thinking about it as like a tree, understanding a tree and then understanding the branches and then understanding the leaves. So we don't want to be focusing on the leaves or the branches. We want to be looking at the tree and thinking about where the branches are going off of the tree. And so that's part of what scoping the subject is. It's about kind of taking a few hours to literally go through every single topic within our subject and try and sub-categorize the different topics. So for example, in medicine, let's say I'm doing hematology, rather than diving into glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency and trying to work through it, in alphabetical order, which is utterly ridiculous. But often in medical textbooks, they present stuff in alphabetical order, which just does not make any sense at all. Instead of doing it like that, instead about kind of taking a step back and having like a sort of bird's eye view of what is hematology about. And if we look at hematology from a bird's eye view, we can start seeing, okay, there's only really 3 topics in hematology. We've got anemia, we've got coagulation, and we've got cancer. And within hematology, almost everything can be split up into either anemia, coagulation, or cancer. And then we can be like, okay, that's interesting. So then we've got a few lymphomas, we've got a few leukemias, we've got the myeloproliferative disorders, we've got myelodysplastic syndrome. All of these things can go under the cancer category. Okay, now we've got the thrombophilias and the coagulation disorders. That can go under the clotting category. We've got microcytic, normocytic, macrocytic anemia. We've got thalassemias. That can all go under the anemia category. And we can think, that's amazing. I now understand what the big picture of hematology is. I have scoped the subject, which means that when it comes to revising something like hemophilia, for example, I know exactly where it fits into the bigger picture. Or when it comes to, hairy B-cell lymphoma or, chronic myeloid leukemia or whatever, I know exactly where it fits into the bigger picture so that I'm not just focusing on the leaves. I'm looking at the leaf of chronic myeloid leukemia, but I'm understanding what branch it comes from and what general tree it comes from, rather than just focusing on the detail. And I think that's really important. And this is something that I recommend to my physiology students these days, that they do at the start of every lecture series. Like, instead of thinking about, all right, lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3, lecture 4, think about it as, all right, okay, cool. We're doing cardiology, cardiovascular physiology now. Let me just look through all of the lectures, even before we started the lectures, just to see what the different subheadings are. And now this is something that I do in Notion. So in fact, I'm just going to show you now. So this is what my cardiovascular physiology Notion page looks like. And basically, I have scoped the subject by converting my entire lecture notes into the subheadings. So I know all the different lectures in this. I know that we've got lecture, 3 is the topic and 8 is the lecture within the topic. Capillary flow and pressure. I know it's got capillaries, capillary exchange of solutes, capillary exchange of water, stalling filtration, resorption of the pancreas system, edema, and congestive cardiac failure. Like, I've scoped the subject and I know that those are the things within that particular lecture. And then I've scoped the subject as a whole by knowing what the different lectures are within it. And crucially, I made this list of things even before I started going over lecture 1, because it means that it just gives me more of an understanding of where stuff fits in. So that when we're talking about the fetal circulation and we're talking about the oxygen dissociation curve for hemoglobin, instead of just being focused on that leaf, I see that, the branch is fetal circulation, and the branch of that is sort of why we need a circulation and the overview of it. And that's in general part of the tree of cardiovascular physiology. So the reason I'm going on about this so much is because this is something that I used to not do when I was in secondary school and early on in university, because no one had told me that you should do this, that you should, before starting to learn a subject, or even before starting to be even taught a subject, you should actually go through the whole subject and figure out what the subheadings are. But then since I started doing it, I found that now when I'm learning details, I can appreciate the bigger picture. I can appreciate the bird's eye view. And there's an analogy I like in medicine, which I'm sure applies to other subjects as well, which is that you've got the bird's eye view and then you've got the frog's eye view. And the annoying thing is that most of the exams test us on the frog's eye view, like, you know, that nitty-gritty minutiae detail. But actually the bird's eye view is the thing that's important for A, helping us understand the subject, and B, at least in medicine, for helping us actually apply it in real life. Because really in real life, as a doctor, we never really think about the intricacies of how the receptors work. Whereas that was what we were tested on in medical school. We just think about the broad picture. So starting off with the broad picture and then narrowing down is, I think, a much better way than, you know, that mistake that we all make of starting with the details and then forgetting, losing the forest from the trees. So that's what I'll say about scoping the subject. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.